If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you. The car I'm driving today is a 1980 Porsche 911 SC. SC, Super Carrera. Both those traditional Porsche names, Super and Carrera, combined in this car give it actually a very interesting clue as to its actual character. This model was designed to bring Porsche and the 911 to a somewhat wider audience. An audience that's not so sportily oriented, but wanted more of a sporty grand touring car, which is interesting, of course, because like the 1976 Cadillac Eldorado last convertible, this was supposed to have been the last 911. The 928 had been introduced and thought that it would supersede the 911 as the flagship of the Porsche line, but obviously, as we all know, that didn't happen. But it's very interesting that the characteristics of the 911 SC have combined to not only make it a really popular car when it was new, but an even more compelling car as a collector's item. And there's lots of reasons why. Of course, it's baffling to a non-911 enthusiast, the fact that these cars all seem to look alike from 1963 until the present day in many ways. But they do have different characters. And one of the things about the 911 SC that is so interesting is the way it combines that sort of traditional Porsche handiness and connection to the road with a drivability that you don't really often associate with sports cars. This is an engine that has a power curve that pulls from very low RPM, so you can actually use it and sort of feel the power around town. It's a car that almost encourages you not to upshift because the sound of the engine in the lower gears is so great, and you're getting a lot of power there, so that's also a lot of fun. One of the other things about Porsche in this period, of course, is the fact that although many people talk about the Honda Acura NSX as being sort of the first practical sports car, Porsche went to great lengths to make the 911 a practical car back in 1975 when they first started to galvanize the body against rust. And in fact, by the time you get to this year, 1980, they were actually giving a 6-year anti-corrosion perforation guarantee, which is somewhat extraordinary when you think about a sports car. And its practicality. Porsche and practicality are not always spoken in the same breath, but I think that cars like this especially really give that spirit of what Porsche was looking for. A car with terrific performance, comfortable, that can be used on an everyday basis if necessary. This particular Porsche 911 SC is not quite as it was delivered back in 1980. As we can all recall, those of us who were around, emissions controls were really strangling the performance of a lot of cars such as the Porsche 911, and manufacturers had to find whatever way possible to meet emissions controls and maintain a certain standard of performance. By the time this car arrived in the US, it was putting out about 140 horsepower, which is not tragic, in a day of 185 horsepower Corvettes and the like, but still not quite what the makers intended. In Europe, in the late 70s, the 911 SC was putting out 200 horsepower, and so this is quite a come down from that. But this example from the Audrain collections has been beautifully breathed on by our good friends at Road Scholars down in North Carolina, and today puts out just over 191 horsepower, which is quite handy in a car of this capability. Another very interesting and totally period item on this car is, of course, the federally mandated 85 mile per hour speedometer with 55 clearly picked out in orange to make sure that you know where that number is, the national speed limit. It's a great reminder of what was and also what is, because of course this car can handily outpace that speedometer. We won't do that today, of course. We're traveling on local public roads, but the eagerness and available power in this engine, it's clear that this is doing what the Porsche engineers designed it to do. There's not a rattle or a squeak. The body feels as tight as the day it left Zuffenhausen, and it feels bulletproof. You know, that's the other reason why these have become so prized by collectors, because it's a car that delivers really characterful motoring and is reliable and will last. It's very interesting as we come into fully the age of the Youngtimer Classic. This is a bit older than the typical Youngtimer, and being a 1980 after all. But nonetheless, there's an entire generation of cars that are completely usable in today's traffic conditions and yet provide a level of driving excitement that you simply cannot find in a new car. Whether it's daily commuting, a weekend trip, or just a fun blast down your favorite road, a car like this 911 SC just really delivers it all. And it's also a great testament to the tunability of these cars. You can tune it to provide additional performance if you want, or leave it in the stock configuration. It's still an enjoyable car, but it doesn't lose any of the character that this car is meant to have. And there is something very magical about driving one of these cars when it's very well sorted and well prepared. The liveliness in the steering, the directness, the power, the smoothness. It's a really wonderful reminder of what sports cars were, and hopefully what they might be again someday, perhaps.